Welcome back to another episode of On Location in Vernon.
Presented by TELUS STORYHIve.
My name is Vernon O'Brien.
I'm your host, Riley Gabori.
And I'm Kevin O'Brien, and we're going to get going. Thank you for having me, guys.
Well, thanks for coming. Why don't you start by just giving us a very brief description of yourself?
My friends would have characterized me in some regard as a punk new bohemian. I shift between both worlds of BMX racing, stand-up paddleboard, all things graphic and music, and just kind of like to do things a little differently, sometimes way out of the box. I'm enjoying myself living in the humble town of Vernon, British Columbia.
For the people that don't know, my name is Vernon O'Brien. This is Kevin O'Brien. He's been a wonderful father growing. He's been a wonderful father growing up these years, and he's had a packed life and a lot to kind of go through. So we thought it would be kind of fun to sit down and dive into that. So you're huge in the BMX world, and that kind of started early on. I'm kind of wondering maybe how that started to come about and where that passion came from.
I grew up in Kamloops in the North Shore. For those who've been to Kamloops, a bit of the grittier part of town. My parents split when I was about 13 years old. And I was kind of a hockey kid, pretty shy at that point. I went and lived with my mom. And at that point, due to challenges within that marriage, Dad said, no more hockey gear for you if you're living with Mom. And so I somehow found a BMX bike. Our friends would sort of ride around the neighborhood doing jumps, knocking over trash cans, getting in trouble, yelling at people, doing all those silly kid things that we did. I somehow stumbled upon a race in a place called Westside, which is deep in the heart of the north side of Kamloops. And I went and I had the Rush soundtrack on, and I was listening to Tom Sawyer, and I was kind of excited, not sure what to do. I showed up and it was like a full-blown BMX race, and I had just transitioned from hockey. So here's my exhibit A, here's Kevin's first race. You can see all of the motocross inspired riders. Then you see the kid with the hockey helmet. And somehow I didn't really care because I was just kind of stoked to be part of that event. I did terrible. I've crashed 3 times. I still ended up getting 3rd or 4th. And I got a little trophy. And I rode home with one hand holding the trophy as if presenting it to nobody along the way. It was about half an hour ride home. And I went home. My mom said, how was it? And I was like, and that meant it was good. And that's kind of how things started in my BMX career, and it just sort of evolved from there.
So like in between you starting BMX, being a bike career, and then starting to actually work in the world of BMX and kind of go into the business side a little bit, what did that journey look like?
We're going to skip some timelines here. So I probably spent the early part of the 80s racing BMX and doing all those wonderful things. Then I decided I should go to school. I did. I got a career in marketing and business, and I lasted all of about 8 months doing that. Sort of the turn of that going into the 90s, I'd left and became a bike career, and it was sort of a pivot. Most of my family, or let's say some of my family on one side was, no longer was I the golden child that had a business career and degree and stuff, and I'd hop back on my bike. I was kind of half ostracized from part of my family, and it didn't matter. I just was happy with what I was doing. I was back to being on a bicycle. I liked cruising around. It was downtown Vancouver well before cell phones ever happened, so I felt relatively safe bombing around there. I sort of worked my way back into BMX racing. This time was sort of carrying a bit of a business acumen with me, but not sure what to do with it. Being on a bicycle was just freedom. To me, it was just, when I was growing up, it was a way to get away from the house. You know, when you're 13 and 14 and your parents are like this and that and this and that, you're like, I'm gonna go riding. And that sort of seemed to carry into, I want to call it adult life, when I was 24, 25. And then I found myself traveling. I kind of got sort of, I guess, bored of living in Kamloops doing what I was doing. And I found myself living summers in Canada and New Zealand off and on for about 5 years. And that was an incredible experience, and still remained on the BMX bike. That's kind of how my life trickled along. I got educated. I decided that part wasn't for me. I went back to the bike with low-paying careers at my foray, but didn't know where that was going to lead me at that point. So I got to mid-90s, I was kind of just floating at that point. I was like, should I stuck with my working career? Don't have a lot of money coming in. I'm like 26, 27, milling around. I know at that point my mom's like, what's going on with O'Brien here? And at the same time, not saying what you should be doing, just sort of carefully maybe hinting that are there other things you could do at that point. I really didn't know what it was. And at that point, part of this whole BMX thing is I started a little brand called Lazy Boy, which is the shirt that I'm wearing. It was because that was a message that I got from my parents when I was young, that you're lazy. I understand it much better now than I did back then. It was that I wasn't always visibly applying myself at something, sweeping the floor or washing the dishes. All of those amazing things that us boys especially have a hard time with when we're young. I kind of use that as a play on words to say, I don't think I'm lazy, but I'm going to adopt that brand as who I am. Maybe I am a lazy boy. And I changed the B-O-Y to B as buoy, B-U-O-Y, thinking that I don't want to make this gender specific. So this is back in 1991 or 92. I don't want to make it so that only people want to buy Lazy Boy. It was buoy, and it became, hey buoy, how are you? Or the Beastie Boys, yeah, buoy. That's how this brand sort of evolved, and it allowed me some way of dealing with this reaffirming thing that my parents had said, that you're lazy or you don't do your chores or something around the house. So I'm still here in 1995, floundering around, about 27 years old, something like that, maybe even closer to your ages. That's a tough place to be. It was a tough place for everyone to watch. All my friends had done their school, they had their jobs, they were probably working on first houses, and I'm like, living in New Zealand. And they would say, oh man, we're living vicariously through you. And at first I was like, yeah, this is great. Like so vicarious. I'm like, what does it mean? I'm like, well, it's like, we'd really like to have your life, but this is great because I have 2 cars and a house now. And I'm like, I wonder if I should have one of those one day. So late bloomer. Yeah, very late bloomer. That's me kind of before what change kind of happened with, I think, my own way of adopting who do I want to be. I think we all kind of hit that point where you may have a persona or grown up with something, or your parents have reaffirmed or said something to you where you want to shed that finally. You just don't know how to do it. Something comes along for you that helps you change that. Yeah.
And what came along for you then to help you?
I was still involved in BMX, but sort of stepping back from...
You're involved
riding.
in like the actual organization side of it?
A little bit. I was kind of dabbling, and I was kind of one of those sort of outspoken... had Race Pro a little bit, and I would go to the track and say, you guys, you know what you should do, you know what you should do. I was one of those kids. Always thinking that it could be better, should be better, why aren't you guys doing that? And eventually, the Canadian BMX Association, one of the board members said, all right, smartass, why don't you do the it should do and bring that to us and start helping us? And I was like, okay, maybe I will. That's kind of how I sort of started working in the sport a little bit, just as a rider rep on a board of directors. I was, the chatty one in the back room, always saying, we got to do all these things. And the board would say, well, have you thought about that? Have you thought about that? And at first, the punk in me was like, no, we're going to do it my way. And then eventually I was like, oh, I'm learning. This is a learning experience for me. I'm with adults that do have some experience in the sport. So I started to kind of allow that to come in a little bit, where before maybe the punk would say no. I started to break that barrier down, and I started to get involved. I got an lucky opportunity. I grabbed the mic at one of the races when the announcer wasn't there, and I started going, and I was calling the races in Ridge Meadows. This is kind of around the time BMX had been announced that it was going to the Olympic Games. And just by luck, someone from CBC had called one of the local tracks and said, hey, do you know of anyone that might be a good announcer? We're looking for someone to do some races leading up to the Olympics. And they said, yeah, how about this guy KOB, Kevin O'Brien? He's the only one that we know of that is doing stuff around here that we think would be a good voice. And that's kind of how it started. They came and said, oh, someone from CBC called, and I was like, CBC? I kind of still have chills sort of thinking about what that meant. And luckily, I had a couple of really good mentors, Phil LaChapelle at CBC. It sort of took me under the wing and said, here's how you can be better in front of that camera. I got a ton of training between sort of 2005, 2008 with CBC on how to deliver a message to people. You could watch the Scott Russells, you could watch all the different broadcasters, find out what your style is. Don't change it, just enhance it and find a way that you want to make people interested. That was always a guiding light, and you guys probably have that, is you want to ask questions, or you want to put something that's relatable. How can the audience go, wow, now I'm interested in the person that you're telling me about? Maybe it's their backstory, maybe they're born in a significant place, maybe they had a hardship, or they grew up in a rough area. Anything that the audience goes, oh, I like this person. This athlete I now want to identify with. I want to be on their journey to get a gold medal or a championship or do well in an event, kind of thing.
For BMX, it takes you all over the world then? Was that with the Olympics?
Yeah, it was just before the Olympics, we got to go to all the World Cups. So it was in the Netherlands, in France, Belgium, Australia. Wow. We kind of went everywhere on the tour. It could be, hey, this is Riley here. Riley really is a big fan of Westerns, and what he actually likes the most is the style and the graphics of that era, or something. And then in your mind, you're starting to go, oh, I can see where that person, and you start to get kind of a feel or a character, and different people and different, audiences will identify with that person.
Yeah.
And that was such an important thing. That sort of carried through life, and you do a little bit of writing for magazines and other stuff. It's to try to just bring people in, because these days there's just so much content, and it's just bleh. So you really have to really know your person, or really connect with someone that's watching a viewer and going, wow, I really want to know more about this person's story. And I now have heartstrings attached to their life kind of going on. So that was brilliant. So we took it all the way to the Olympics in Beijing, China in 2008. I got to stand at the Olympic track and hang out at Canada House. From that point, it sort of took me on a 12-year journey of doing World Cups, either on-site across the world or voicing in a room kind of thing for Eurosport and a bunch of other places. Yeah. So I still kind of knew what was going on with the sport at that point. I had sort of faded back a little bit from day to day. We were in the States for a while, moved back to Vernon, and then came upon a sport called stand-up paddleboard. And it was something that I actually tried in other countries before experiencing it in Canada. So that whole career opened up a whole bunch of other things for me that I would have never expected. It's been pretty cool to have the mic in front of me for so many years, and I took that into the paddleboard world later on, adopted some things from BMX and transferred that into doing paddleboard races later on.
So before we move on to the paddleboard, you were mentioning finding like your style through this. Is there like a moment or a project or anything you've worked on where you had like that, my God, I found it, like you found your voice?
Yeah, probably would have been the Olympics, would have been
like the big.
But it wasn't like, hey, I proved to everybody I'm here and I'm this. Yeah. It was, I felt like I had transformed storytelling in the sense of when in the beginning I was just talking at the camera or voicing something that was in my head or in a script. I felt like that's what was happening before. So the Olympic, that experience in working with CBC and everybody and all that, the mentors along the way opened up, it was a simplicity of storytelling that was the transformation. That when I did the Olympics, I went, oh, okay, I really understand. That sort of carried me into doing World Cup racing, where I knew how to give nuggets of information to people that they would go, yeah, I like that. I'm very interested in that. I would watch tons of tape from other people and go, to, wow, that guy's amazing or that girl's amazing. It was the storytelling side that really helped just take a lot of noise and put it into a simple, tell people what they want to hear. Yeah. Give them something that's interesting. And that was a transformation, both in being on the mic, both in doing graphics, both in writing stories. And that sort of really has carried through my career.
Before we move on, real quick, because when you started doing BMX, that was kind of when it was first coming up and it was first kind of becoming a thing. I'm wondering, how has it changed since you started? What are the ways you've kind of maybe seen like the people evolve and the whole kind of community?
That's a good question about where it's evolved. The sport still remains a niche sport, and I'm now involved. Came back as a writer a few years ago again to try to relive some lost glory, and then started working in the industry, looking after the Canadian program. I thought, man, this sport's going to be so different now that it's gone through the Olympics. Everyone in the world is going to be changed, and it's going to be this and that. And I showed up at our local track in Vernon, and I was like, it's kind of the same, and this is kind of cool. And I thought, this is such a unique sport that way, that if it lost its expressionism, those things I talked about that attracted to me in the early 80s, I thought maybe the sport would be gone. Maybe it just blends into the rest of the sports in the world and just becomes just sort of dry and bland. And it wasn't. It was still the same. Locally, the creative environment at the Olympic and the world level, of course, that changes anytime you have a sport that goes to the Olympics. The rules change. Sometimes the gear changes. It's a little more tight-fitting at the Olympics. It doesn't look as moto as it used to look. Essentially, the core essence of the sport and the expressionism combined with athleticism, still there. The speed levels have gone up, but that joy and that sort of family-oriented atmosphere is still exactly the way it was.
Well, do we want to move on to your Vernon years, I guess?
We had lived in Ohio for a few years, working for a U.S. organization to do some bigger and greater things, which ended up being almost like school for me again, to learn how big the sport is in America and how much business went along with it. So I learned a lot in that experience down there. The marketing of the sport, how to reach kids all across America is a pretty hard thing to do. I mean, Canada's a giant country with not a lot of people. America's a giant country with a lot of people. So that was a whole new experience for me. We came back in 2008, right after the Olympics. The family had come back a few months earlier, and then I stayed a bit longer, and then I came back. And then it was a bit of a crash in the sense of my career had wrapped up working in BMX down in the US. Sort of sitting in quiet Vernon. I grew up in Kamloops, a little bit bigger than Vernon, and I was like, now what? It was kind of this sort of anxious, half year trying to figure out who are we as a family, how are we going to exist. I didn't necessarily have a career in front of me at that point. None of us were working at that point. Bowen would have been, 5, 6 years old or something like that. I had I got involved playing sports again. So I joined a hockey group, whatever, and I had been on a stand-up paddleboard a couple times in France. I would go out to the shoreline, especially if we were at a place that had beach or something, and I saw stand-up paddleboarding, and I thought I'd try it there, and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I'd done it a couple times there, and then living in Vernon, we'd been to Cal Beach a couple times, Kalamalka Lake, it's a beautiful lake. I thought, well, it'd be kind of cool one day. We should get kayaks or paddleboards. At that point, we really didn't know what we wanted to do, and I went off to a hockey tournament in Vancouver, and I went to a store and they had a paddleboard, and I'm like, oh, it's huge. Wow. I bet it's amazing. I thought, oh, I have to buy this. I don't have a job, but I have to. And so it was kind of that, it sort of harkened me back to the early 80s when I got involved in BMX, right at the tip of where a sport is just starting to catch wind. And it's just luck of the draw. It was just timing. It was all in the interesting timing. I bought a 12-foot paddleboard, put it on the roof of the car, and then I went, oh my God, I'm playing at a hockey tournament tonight at 10 p.m. I can't leave this board on the roof. So Kevin drags in paddleboard into a very small dressing room for the guys. And so most of the guys had to dress this because I had a paddleboard that went from the top to the bottom corner, and everyone had to do their skates leaning down. I showed up with it late the next morning, and I got in the driveway, and my wife Michelle was like, what is on the roof? And I'm like, paddleboard. She's like, you don't have a job? I'm like, I know. Isn't this great? And we spent a beautiful summer with Bowen. All three of us were on the paddleboard. We just enjoyed Kalamalka Lake. We kind of went work, schmirk, whatever. We just sort of let go for a beautiful summer. I think when you let go, that's when opportunities come. If you're trying hard and you're like this doesn't work, the world kind of seems to know that. So we sort of let go of any, desire to work in that sense. And then I was still traveling, so I, would go paddle on Cal Lake, and I'm like, yeah, it's pretty nice out here. And then I'd go to some other country, and I'd go, oh, it was okay. And then we'd come back to Cal Lake and go, wow, this is an amazing lake. And there was just a light bulb moment one day. It was, oh, paddleboarding on Cal Lake. If it's really this good, this is kind of an interesting thing. And we would walk by this place called the Kalamalka General Store. And we walked by and looked in one day, and it was kind of like, wonder if this could be a little paddleboard store. I wonder if we could start renting things. And we actually approached the city of Coldstream, which is a small district in Vernon, which is sort of at the head of the lake. They denied our application. And they said, no, we're not ready for that kind of thing. So we approached the Korean family that owned the Cal General Store. And they said, can we put up a little pop-up shop inside one of your grocery bays? And I think they were kind of like, sure you can, because they were just full of mattresses and mice. And they just thought, someone wants to rent that space? Oh. Go ahead. It's all yours. And we're like, not knowing what that actually meant. So boom, we put a little paddleboard store in there. We had a friend of ours, Shay Ferguson, who helped us. He helped us kind of, retrofit a tent structure into what looked the paddleboard shop, and that just took off for us. And I had to actually stop traveling, doing announcing, to kind of start doing the paddleboard thing. We were at the right time. We just picked the right time. Sport was just kind of coming into Canada. We just happened to be on one of the most beautiful lakes probably in the country. Yeah. I think that's arguably one of the nicest bodies of water around. So it was a nice change of scenery. It was just kind of a neat way to watch that evolve. And we were at, we got to be at the beach every day. We would go down and do demos. We'd rent boards. We had boards in our basement here that we couldn't fit at the shop. So sometimes someone would come to the house and knock on the front door, and we'd go down to the weird basement and go, what do you think about this 12-foot board? And that's how it started. We just kind of went from ground up, and it just took off.
And the sport blew up that much, in 2010? That's like the first time I ever saw a paddleboard was around that. And you were talking about paddleboard racing. Yeah. I didn't even realize that was a thing in that sense.
I don't think we even knew it was a thing until this is with the BMX background quickly, came in, and Michelle would be like, so you're sure you want to do a paddleboard race, eh? Like you said you were kind of tired of doing the bike races, and I'm like, yeah, it's gonna be good. And so we started something called the Kalamalka Classic. We named our shop Kalavita. I'll just back up a little bit. Kalavita was Kala, sort of a Hawaiian word for go with the flow kind of thing. We did a bit of research. Some of the history you'll find in Lake Country museums where there was a Hawaiian person connected with the tribes, the local tribes around here, the indigenous tribes. So there was sort of a Hawaiian element, Chief Kalamalka. So there was kind of a neat connection that way. And we thought Kala is just kind of a cool name, and Vita obviously is life. So it was like Kala Life. And that's how the name was. And then the Paddleboard Festival was the Kalamalka Classic. And we thought, we're going to paddle from one end of Cal Lake to the other. And when we said that to people, they're like, what? You're going to do what? Isn't that for boats? Don't boats do that? And we're like, no, we're going to do it on paddleboards. And there weren't a lot of races around anywhere. We were just kind of making up as we go. It just seemed it was the right thing to do. And then I wanted to have a BMX-inspired event, which is this little thing called Wikiholo. You'd sprint off the beach, come back to the beach, go around a couple buoys. So it was as BMX as I could actually possibly get on the water.
Minus the big jumps.
Minus the big jumps. Every once in a while a boat would come by and there'd be some small waves or a bit of wind. That for me was kind of this little twinkle where I could take this BMX world and integrate it into the Kalamalka Classic, and it just became a beautiful festival. We met, because we were new to Vernon at that point, it became our social network. Like in the sense of, instead of going to a restaurant or there are no clubs in town for the 30s and 40s or whatever, or pubs, they were coming to us, and we would, you'd talk to someone about a paddleboard or a rental and go, these are actually really cool people. Maybe we could hang out. And that's how our friend network really started. They could have been people that own businesses in town, or just, friends that you met, coming in to be part of the shop. And that was kind of really how we sort of integrated ourselves into the small town. They would come to the shop, you'd get a chance to kind of meet each other and go home and go, that couple is really cool, let's go hang with them, or Bowen might meet some friends there or something like that. And that's how a lot of our early friend groups really started. It was a great way to connect with the community.
Well, before we wrap things up, I want to know, I think it'd be interesting for the people to know kind of how you got back into the world of BMX and what you've been doing in the last couple of years with the Hall of Fame and that kind of whole shebang.
Yeah, good question. Back into BMX. Living at the beach for about 12 or 13 years was pretty hard to get away from. And so any time that I looked at my dusty old BMX that sat under our back porch, I went, nope. And I would grab my paddle boards. Just being on the water in the middle of the summer is magical in this province. We sold the shop a couple of years ago, and we were done with retail, and we were done with frontline customer service. We kind of let that go, and then I took a year off, meaning I took an adult gap year. So later on in life, you may do that where you're going to change careers or something's come to its terminus and you go, now what? And instead of forcing yourself into doing something, we made the decision to just take a year off. And that meant nothing, no agenda. It was like the no agenda year. We're going to putz around our home and clean the things that we've forgotten the last 13 years. I started to kind of get back into looking after the physical side of my life, which was going back to the gym. And, because attrition was happening, muscle was literally falling off in the morning when I was eating cereal. I could see muscle fibers on the floor. And I was like, okay, I was having a hard time even lifting paddleboards over my head in the end. So I thought, okay, we're just going to get healthy again. We're just going to get healthy as a family. We're going to get healthy as a house physically. And I was just under the shed one day looking at the paddleboard and I saw the bike again and I went, I should probably just take it out for a ride. Wouldn't that be kind of fun? I'll drag it out. And it took me probably 2 hours wrenching in the garage to get this little beloved bike out. I hadn't seen it in probably 10 years. And off I went to the track and I was like, oh my God, this bike is small. I'm a big kid on a small bike, which is something that everybody says to you when you're young and everybody says to you still when you're old. And so off I went and then I would start going more often and then I upgraded the bike quickly. And then I invited Bone out to the track one day because I got some gear. I brought out an old jersey from 20 years ago and some old pants and checkerboard shoes and off the track, and I wanted Bowen to film me at the track, and I thought, this is a good connection day. He can see me out there doing this BMX thing. Maybe he'll want to do it again or something, which I'm glad he didn't. It was just kind of a neat experience to be at the track with him filming it. So this is kind of cool, to have the next generation there, see his big dad ride around this track on a little bike. And then I went out to a local race. I thought I'd go out and see what it was like, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of people here. And I had no idea that the scene was booming because we were, this is 2 years ago. So it's post-COVID.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that, COVID shattered that sport because you weren't allowed to be in proximity and the sport had flourished immediately right away. And it was that sort of vibe of the Vernon BMX track and Shiloh Orchard and the crew there. Everybody was just, very, open and like, oh my God, yeah, come ride with us. And I was like, I think I will. And that's kind of how it started. And, fast forward, I rode all that year, ended up getting like a number 1 age group title for myself. And then somehow that wasn't enough for me. I thought maybe, that's good. I've experienced that. And there was a race in America called the Grand Nationals. It's something that I've never been to, something that I'd never actually wanted to go to because I knew it was a giant, a week-long week of racing. And I do like being able to go to the track during the day and come home at night and say, that day is done. This one is an odyssey of 4 days in this arena in Tulsa that I thought, that doesn't sound appealing. I'm sure it's exciting, but I never had really applied myself physically to train in BMX. And I thought, I'm going to do it. So a year ago, I decided to really focus on the gym and start working on the mind a little bit and try to get stronger mentally, because mentally is quite a big thing in BMX when you're at the higher level. Everyone ends up having they've worked out and they've done all those things, but upstairs you need to be a little bit stronger. So I did a bunch of that work along the way, and I finally got my way to this race in America called the Grands. And I made the main event at the Race of Champions, and to me that was able to kind of get rid of this sort of demon where I'd been really good at the working side of BMX, but had never applied myself in training in the racing side. So it took me a long time. This is in my mid-50s that I finally understood what it meant to apply yourself to physically learn how to train. Not just go to the track and ride and go, I'm riding and I'm good. Yeah. Where there was a specific thing you can work on. There's a lot of things that athletes do in the background that you and I will never see. They're very small exercises or very small things that translate into big things that only they might even see. It might be something that you watch in hockey and go, wow, I noticed that Atu Ratu or whatever the guy is for the Canucks now is suddenly becoming the scoring machine, and it's because he's doing some small work in the background that you'll never know. It's super unsexy, but it's super important. And so that journey of BMX really sort of took me all the way to this race where I was able to, anyone that's going to a race or something is trying to accomplish something, whether it's the joy of the experience of the event, the people, a specific result from the race. To me, it was just making that main event and going, I did the right things. I was prepared for this one. There were some adversities, like when you push yourself when you're 56 and 57 too hard, your body does break down. And then shortly after that, I really wanted to re-experience working in the sport. I think I knew in the background that I did when I grabbed that bike on that first dusty ride a couple of years ago. I think that was just setting me on that path. Like, I had no idea when I, first went to the, a dirt track in 1981 that I would go to the Olympics someday. And it was a long journey to get there. It wasn't like a straight line. Filming and doing those kind of things, clearly not a straight line. Even though there are some times when you do have to take that job that you may not want for a couple of years, you know that you're gonna come back to your passion. Your passion will find you. Even though you might ignore it for a bunch of years, it'll claw you back and you'll find yourself in there, and you might find you needed that experience, you needed that deviation or that detour to come back and be a better person or a better version of yourself. And that's all you can ask for.
You're the top player in your age range now, though, aren't you, in Canada?
I didn't ride this year a lot, but last year I was, yeah, in both. There's 2 wheel sizes in BMX, 20-inch size, which is the classic, standard, and then there's cruiser for the bigger wheel kind of thing. So I did get a couple of those titles in Canada. Last year. This year I was trying to get titles in administrative work and trying to get kids involved in the sport and put on a better experience in the sport. Had a great year doing it with BMX Canada, USA BMX. I got the chance to kind of be their development director in Canada, and I love the word development because it just is an umbrella for how can you provide a better experience, or how can we attract more people to this cool little 2-wheeled sport. So whatever sport it is, just find your passion and stick with it, and don't be worried about a couple detours because you're always coming back. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Well, thanks so much for doing the interview.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to click the QR code on the screen and find out more.
This has been On Location in Vernon, presented by TELUS STORYHIVE with Riley, Bowen, and our guest Kevin.
Thanks, guys.